The fire had been burning for 6 hours. Smoke filled the corridors of the research station called Sanctuary of Light. The station floated in the cold darkness of space, far from any planet, far from any help. And inside, 300 aliens were waiting to die. Counselor Thyra pressed her back against the cold metal wall. Her skin glowed with a soft blue light, the way all Valkyrie skin did when they were afraid. She could not stop the glow. She could not stop the fear. The sounds of destruction echoed through the station. Metal screamed as it was torn apart. Somewhere in the distance, she heard her people crying out. The Cathari had come without warning. They were raiders. Pirates. Monsters. Their bodies were covered in hard black shells like insects. And they stood 7 feet tall, on legs that bent the wrong way. They had claws that could cut through steel, and teeth that could crack bone. But the worst thing about them was not their bodies. It was their minds. They enjoyed fear. They fed on it like food. The more their victims screamed, the more the Cathari liked it. Thyra had seen them take the outer sections of the station. She had watched on the security screens as her friends, her colleagues, her family ran and fell and did not get up again. Now only the central core remained. 300 Valkyrie huddled together in the main hall, holding their children, whispering prayers to gods that did not seem to be listening. The barricade at the main door would not hold much longer. Thyra could hear the Cathari on the other side, scratching at the metal, testing it, playing with their food. She had sent the distress signal hours ago. She had begged for help from anyone who could hear. The signal had gone out to every species in the galaxy, to every ship, to every station, to every world. 17 species had received that signal. The Dravine heard it and calculated the distance. Too far, they decided. Not worth the fuel. The Morthax heard it and considered the enemy. Cathari were dangerous. Too dangerous to fight for strangers. The Solani heard it and counted the survivors. Only 300? Not enough to matter. One by one, 17 species did the math. They weighed the lives of the Valkyrie against the cost of saving them. They measured souls like coins on a scale. And one by one, they decided to do nothing. But there was one more signal. One more ship. One more species that heard the screaming in the dark. The carrier Valor's Edge was 4 billion miles away when the distress call came through. It was a human ship, big and gray and covered in weapons. Inside it lived 2,000 sailors and 500 Marines. They were on patrol, watching the edges of human space, looking for trouble. They found it. Captain Danny Ortega stood on the bridge and listened to the message. He was 43 years old with tired eyes and gray in his hair. He had been a soldier for 20 years. He had seen things that kept him awake at night, but as he listened to the Valkyrie counselor begging for help, something old and hot woke up in his chest. Lieutenant Commander Katie Vance stood beside him. She was younger, with sharp eyes and quick hands. She was already calculating before he asked. "How fast can we get there?" Danny said. Katie looked at her screens. Her fingers moved across the controls. "If we push the engines past the red line, we can make it in 9 hours. But sir, the engines might not survive. And even if they do, we will arrive with no support, no backup, and no idea what we are flying into." Danny nodded slowly. He looked at the message again. He thought about the 17 species who had already said no. He thought about 300 people he had never met. People who were counting down the minutes until they died. "Do it," he said. "Push the engines, and wake the Marines." Katie did not argue. She had served with Danny for 5 years. She knew that look in his eyes. She turned and began giving orders, and the great ship groaned as its engines roared to life. Deep in the belly of the Valor's Edge, in a section of the ship called Marine Country, a bell began to ring. It was a harsh sound, loud and urgent. It meant trouble. It meant someone needed help. Gunnery Sergeant Marcus Cole was cleaning his rifle when the bell rang. He was 35 years old, built like a boulder, with hands that could crush stone and eyes that had seen too much death. He had been a Marine for 15 years. He had fought on 6 different worlds. He had lost friends, gained scars, and learned one truth that he held closer than anything else. When someone screamed for help, you answered. Always. No matter what. He put down his rifle and walked to the briefing room. His squad was already gathering. There was Corporal Megan Harlow, a small woman with red hair and a temper to match. There was Lance Corporal Derek Nunez, a quiet man who prayed before every mission and fought like a demon during it. There was Private First Class Tyler Reeves, barely 20 years old, still young enough to believe he was immortal. And there were others, 20 Marines in total. 20 men and women who had sworn an oath to protect those who could not protect themselves. Captain Ortega's face appeared on the screen at the front of the room. He looked tired. He looked worried. But underneath that, Marcus could see something else. Determination. "Listen up," Danny said. "There is a research station 9 hours from here. 300 civilians are trapped inside. Alien species called the Velkari. Scientists, families, children. They are being attacked by Kethari raiders, and no one else is coming to help them." He paused to let that sink in. "The Galactic Council has decided that 300 lives are not worth the risk. 17 species have turned away. But we are not going to turn away. We are humans. We are Marines, and we do not let innocent people die if there is anything we can do about it." Marcus felt the old fire burning in his chest. He looked at his squad and saw the same fire in their eyes. "Gear up," Marcus said quietly after the screen went dark. "Check your weapons. Check your armor. Get some rest if you can, because in 9 hours, we are going to war." Tyler Reeves raised his hand. "Sarge, what do we know about these Kethari?" Marcus looked at the young private. "They are big. They are mean. They have never fought humans before." He smiled, but there was no humor in it. "They are in for a surprise." The ship flew through the darkness of space, pushing its engines beyond their limits. Inside, 20 Marines prepared for battle. They checked their rifles. They sharpened their knives. They wrote letters to people back home, just in case. And 9 hours away, 300 Velkari huddled in the darkness, waiting for death. They did not know that help was coming. They did not know that somewhere in the black void of space, a ship full of humans was racing toward them. They did not know that they were about to witness something that would change the galaxy forever. The Marines were coming, and nothing in the universe was going to stop them. The Valor's edge dropped out of faster-than-light travel and into a nightmare. Captain Danny Ortega stood on the bridge and stared at the view screen. His stomach turned. His hands gripped the railing until his knuckles went white. He had seen bad things in his 20 years of service. He had seen battlefields covered in bodies. He had seen cities burned to ash. But he had never seen anything like this. The Sanctuary of Light was dying. The research station had been beautiful once. It was shaped like a flower, with long, graceful arms reaching out from a central hub. The Velkari had built it to study the stars. They had filled it with telescopes and laboratories and gardens where alien plants grew under artificial sunlight. It had been a place of peace and learning. Now it was a tomb. Fires burned in a dozen places. Atmosphere leaked from holes in the hull, forming clouds of frozen gas that sparkled in the starlight. 3 Kethari warships circled the station like sharks around a wounded fish. They were ugly ships, all sharp angles and dark metal, built for one purpose only: killing. "How many hostiles?" Danny asked. Katie Vance checked her screens. Her face was pale. 3 ships, approximately 400 Kethari warriors on the station, maybe more, 400. And Danny had 20 Marines. The math was not good. But the Marines had not asked about the math. They had asked about the mission. "Launch the dropships," Danny ordered. "All batteries, target those warships. Give our people cover." The Valor's Edge was not built for this kind of fight. It was a carrier, designed to support troops, not to battle warships. But Danny did not care. He pushed his ship forward, guns blazing, drawing the attention of the Kethari fleet. In the hangar bay, Gunnery Sergeant Marcus Cole climbed into the dropship. His squad was already strapped in around him. 20 Marines in heavy armor, carrying enough weapons to start a small war. Their faces were calm, but their eyes were sharp. They knew what was coming. The dropship launched. It shot out of the hangar like a bullet, and dove toward the burning station. Behind them, the Valor's Edge traded fire with the Cathari warships. Explosions lit up the darkness, but Marcus did not look back. He kept his eyes forward, on the target, on the mission. 30 seconds to breach, the pilot shouted. Marcus grabbed his rifle. Lock and load. Remember your training. Stay together. Watch each other's backs. Tyler Reeves sat across from him, gripping his weapon so tight his hands were shaking. The young private was scared. Marcus could see it in his eyes. But fear was okay. Fear kept you alive. What mattered was what you did with the fear. Tyler, Marcus said quietly. The private looked up. Just breathe. Follow me. Do what I do. You are going to be fine. Tyler nodded. Some of the shaking stopped. The dropship hit the station hard. It punched through a breach in the hull, where the metal had been torn open by Cathari weapons. The impact threw everyone forward against their straps. Then the rear ramp dropped, and the Marines ran into hell. The corridor was dark and filled with smoke. Red emergency lights flickered on the walls. The air was hot and tasted like burning plastic. And standing in the corridor, blocking their path, were the Cathari. Marcus had read the reports. He had seen the pictures. But nothing had prepared him for the real thing. The Cathari were monsters. They stood 7 feet tall on bent legs. Their bodies were covered in black armor, that was not armor at all, but their own skin, hard as steel. They had 4 arms, each ending in claws that dripped with something that might have been blood. Their heads were smooth and eyeless. But they did not need eyes. They hunted by sound and smell and the taste of fear in the air. There were at least 30 of them in the corridor. They turned toward the Marines, and a sound came from their throats. It was not a roar. It was not a scream. It was something worse, a clicking, chattering noise that seemed to crawl inside your skull and wrap around your brain. Other species would have frozen. Other species would have run. The Marines opened fire. The corridor exploded with light and sound. Rifle rounds tore through the air. The Cathari charged, their claws reaching, their mouths opening to show rows of teeth like broken glass. The first wave fell under the concentrated fire. The second wave came over their bodies. Corporal Megan Harlow stood at Marcus's right side, her rifle kicking against her shoulder. She was shouting something. But Marcus could not hear her over the noise. He saw a Cathari break through the line and reach for her. He put 3 rounds in its chest and kicked it away. "Move forward," Marcus shouted. "Push them back." The Marines advanced. They moved in pairs, covering each other, stepping over the bodies of fallen enemies. The smoke was so thick that Marcus could barely see. The heat was so intense that his armor was burning against his skin. But he kept moving. They all kept moving. A Cathari claw slashed across Tyler Reeves's arm. The young private cried out and stumbled. Marcus grabbed him before he could fall and pushed him behind cover. "How bad?" Marcus asked. Tyler looked at his arm. Blood was soaking through his sleeve. The cut was deep. "I can still shoot," he said through gritted teeth. That was all Marcus needed to hear. He pulled out a bandage and wrapped it around Tyler's arm as tight as he could. "Stay behind me. Keep shooting." Lance Corporal Derek Nunez was fighting like a man possessed. He had lost his rifle somewhere in the chaos and was using his pistol in one hand and his combat knife in the other. He moved through the Cathari like a dancer, ducking under claws, sliding between legs, leaving bodies in his wake. But even he was not fast enough to dodge everything. A claw caught him across the back, tearing through his armor. He went down on one knee, blood spreading across the floor beneath him. "Derek!" Megan shouted. Derek looked up. A Cathari stood over him, raising its claws for the killing blow. Derek smiled. His hand came up with his pistol and he put a round right through the creature's open mouth. "I am fine," he said, climbing back to his feet. His voice was tight with pain. "Keep moving." They kept moving. Through the smoke. Through the fire. Through the bodies of enemies that fell before them and got up again and fell again. The Cathari had never fought humans before. They had conquered dozens of species. They had fed on the fear of countless victims. They thought they knew what war looked like. They were wrong. The Marines did not fight like the other species the Cathari had hunted. They did not freeze. They did not run. They did not beg for mercy or curl up and wait to die. They fought like something the Cathari had never seen before. They fought like they were not afraid to die. And slowly, step by step, bullet by bullet, they pushed the monsters back. Somewhere deep in the station, 300 Velkari heard the sounds of battle getting closer. They did not know what was happening. They did not know that help had arrived. They only knew that something had changed. Something was fighting back, and for the first time in 6 hours, they felt something other than fear. They felt hope. Counselor Thyra had accepted that she was going to die. She stood at the front of the main hall, her body between the barricade and her people. Behind her, 300 Velkari waited in silence. Some held their children. Some held each other. Some sat alone, their eyes empty, their minds already somewhere far away. The barricade was just a pile of furniture and broken equipment. It would not stop the Cathari. Nothing would stop the Cathari. When they broke through, Thyra wanted to be the first one they killed. Maybe that would buy the others a few more seconds. Maybe those seconds would matter. She did not think they would. The Cathari had been playing with them for hours. They could have broken through at any time. But they enjoyed the waiting. They enjoyed the fear. Every few minutes, they would scratch at the barricade, just to remind the Velkari that they were still there, just to keep the terror fresh. Thyra's skin was glowing so bright with fear that it hurt. The light pulsed with her heartbeat. She could not make it stop. She had tried to be brave for her people, but her body betrayed her. A little girl tugged at her robe. Thyra looked down. The child was maybe 5 years old, with big dark eyes and skin that glowed a soft green instead of blue. Green meant sadness. Green meant she had already given up. "Are the monsters going to eat us?" the girl asked. Thyra did not know what to say. She could not lie to this child, but she could not tell her the truth either. "I do not know," she whispered. "But I will protect you. I promise." It was a promise she could not keep. She knew that. The child knew that. But sometimes, a promise was all you had. Then, something changed. The scratching at the barricade stopped. The Cathari on the other side went quiet. For a moment, there was no sound at all except the distant groan of the dying station. Then Thyra heard something she did not understand. Gunfire. Not Cathari weapons, which made a wet, organic sound. This was different. Sharp, mechanical, rhythmic, and screaming. But not Velkari screaming. Something else. Something inhuman. The Cathari were screaming. The gunfire got closer. The screaming got louder. Thyra heard heavy footsteps pounding down the corridor outside. She heard voices shouting in a language she did not recognize. She heard explosions and the crash of bodies hitting walls. The Velkari in the hall began to stir. They lifted their heads. Their skin flickered with confusion and fear and something else. Something that had been dead for hours. Hope. The barricade exploded inward. Thyra threw herself in front of the little girl, ready to take the blow that was coming. But no blow came. Instead, she saw something that would stay with her for the rest of her life. Through the smoke and fire came creatures she had never seen before. They were tall, almost as tall as the Cathari, but their bodies were different. They stood upright on 2 legs. They had 2 arms. Their faces were flat and strange, with small eyes and soft skin. They wore heavy armor that was scorched and dented and covered in things. Thyra did not want to look at too closely. They were carrying weapons that still smoked from recent fire, and they were not hunting the Velkari. They were protecting them. Gunnery Sergeant Marcus Cole stepped through the ruined barricade and swept his eyes across the hall. 300 aliens huddled together, their skin glowing with colors he did not understand. They were thin and fragile-looking, with large eyes that reflected the emergency lights. They looked terrified. "Friendlies," Marcus called back to his squad. "Megan, Derek, Establish a perimeter. Tyler, start triage. Check for wounded. The Marines moved into position. They spread out around the hall, their weapons pointed outward, their backs to the survivors. They were creating a wall of flesh and steel between the Valkyrie and anything that might come through those doors. Tyler Reeves, his arm still wrapped in a bloody bandage, began moving through the crowd. He could not speak their language, but some things did not need words. A gentle touch, a calm voice, a bottle of water offered to a crying child. Thyra stared at the human in front of her. She could not move. She could not speak. Her mind was trying to process what was happening, but it kept failing. The human knelt down to meet her eyes. He was huge up close. His armor was covered in scratches and burns. His face had a deep cut across one cheek that was still bleeding. He looked like he had walked through a war, because he had. "Who are you?" Thyra whispered. Her voice translator turned her words into the human language. The human's eyes softened. When he spoke, his voice was gentle. It was strange to hear such a soft voice from such a hard-looking creature. "We are United Earth Marines, ma'am," he said. "We are here to take you home." Thyra felt something break inside her. All the fear, all the despair, all the hours of waiting to die. It came pouring out of her in a wave that she could not stop. Her skin flashed through a dozen colors. Tears ran down her face. "No one was coming," she said. "We sent the signal. We begged for help. 17 species heard us. 17 species said no." Marcus nodded slowly. "I know." "Why?" Thyra asked. "Why did you come? You do not know us. We have never met. We are nothing to you." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Behind him, his Marines held the perimeter. Corporal Megan Harlow stood at the main door, her rifle raised, her eyes scanning for threats. Lance Corporal Derek Nunez was helping Tyler bandage a wounded Valkyrie elder. They were all bleeding. They were all exhausted. And they were all exactly where they wanted to be. "Because you needed help," Marcus said finally. "That is all the reason we need." Thyra did not understand. She had lived her whole life in a galaxy where everything was measured and calculated, where help was given only when it was profitable, where lives were weighed against costs and usually found wanting. She did not understand a species that would fly across the void, fight through an army of monsters, and bleed for strangers they had never met. But she was starting to learn. The little girl with the green, glowing skin peeked out from behind Thyra. She looked at Marcus with wide eyes. "Are you going to fight the monsters?" she asked. Marcus looked at her. A small smile crossed his face, the first smile he had worn in hours. "We already did," he said. "Now we are going to take you somewhere safe." The girl thought about this. Then she reached out and touched Marcus's armored hand with her tiny fingers. "Thank you," she said. Marcus did not say anything. He just nodded. But something in his eyes changed. Something that looked like the reason he had become a Marine in the first place. Outside the hall, the station groaned. Fires still burned. Kethari reinforcements were coming. The fight was far from over. But for now, in this moment, 300 people who had been waiting to die were going to live. Because someone had answered their call. Because the Marines had come. Getting into the station had been hard. Getting out was going to be much harder. Gunnery Sergeant Marcus Cole looked at the 300 Valkyrie survivors and did the math in his head. They were thin and fragile. Many of them were hurt. Some of them were too old to walk fast. Some of them were children who could barely walk at all, and between them and the dropships was half a kilometer of burning corridors filled with angry Kethari. He had 18 Marines left. 2 had fallen during the push to the survivors. Good soldiers. Good friends. Marcus would mourn them later. Right now, he had a job to do. "Katie, do you copy?" He spoke into his radio. Lieutenant Commander Katie Vance's voice crackled through the static. She was still on the Valor's edge, coordinating the battle in space. "I copy, Sergeant. What is your status?" "Sergeant. We have the survivors. 300 civilians. We are starting the extraction now." We need a clear path to the landing bay. Understood. We are taking heavy fire up here. Captain Ortega is keeping the Kethari ships busy, but we cannot hold them forever. You have maybe 30 minutes before they overwhelm us. 30 minutes. Half a kilometer. 300 civilians. Marcus looked at his Marines. You heard the lady, he said. We move fast. We stay together. We get these people out. The Marines formed a protective ring around the survivors. Corporal Megan Harlow took point at the front. Lance Corporal Derek Nunez and Tyler Reeves covered the rear. The others spread out along the sides, creating a moving wall of protection. Stay close to us, Marcus told Counselor Thyra. Keep your people calm. Keep them moving. Do not stop for anything. Thyra nodded. She turned to her people and spoke in her own language. Her voice was stronger now. The fear was still there, but something else had joined it. Trust. They started moving. The first corridor was empty. The Marines had cleared it on the way in, and the bodies of Kethari still littered the floor. The Velkari had to step over them. Some of them cried, some of them closed their eyes and let others guide them, but they kept moving. The second corridor was not empty. Megan Harlow saw them first. A group of Kethari coming around the corner. At least 20 of them. They were moving fast, their claws clicking on the metal floor, their eyeless heads turning toward the sound of footsteps. Contact front, Megan shouted. She opened fire before the words had finished leaving her mouth. The lead Kethari went down. The others scattered, taking cover behind bulkheads and debris. Keep the civilians moving, Marcus ordered. Push through. The Marines at the front laid down, covering fire while the civilians rushed past. Tyler Reeves grabbed an elderly Velkari who had fallen and carried him under one arm, still firing with the other. Derek Nunez found a young mother frozen in terror and guided her forward, his body between her and the enemy. A Kethari broke through the line and lunged at a group of children. Megan stepped in front of them and took the blow on her armored shoulder. The impact knocked her down. The Kethari raised its claws to finish her. Marcus put 4 rounds in its back. It fell on top of Megan, and she had to push its body off to get back up. Thanks, she said, breathing hard. Thank me when we are out, Marcus replied. They kept moving. The corridors seemed endless. The smoke got thicker. The fires got hotter. Behind them, more Kethari were coming. Marcus could hear them, hundreds of clicking legs getting closer. A Velkari child stumbled and fell. Her mother screamed and tried to go back for her, but the crowd pushed her forward. Marcus saw the little girl lying on the floor, her skin flashing with panic. He scooped her up without breaking stride and handed her to the nearest Marine. Keep her safe. The Marine nodded and kept moving, the child clinging to his armored chest. They reached a junction where 3 corridors met. Kethari were coming from 2 of them. The third led to the landing bay. But it was narrow. Too narrow for 300 people to pass through quickly. We need to hold them here, Marcus said. Buy time for the civilians to get through. Specialist Brooke Hayden stepped forward. She was carrying a flamethrower. Heavy and old-fashioned and incredibly effective. I got this, she said. She planted herself at the junction and opened fire. A wall of flame roared down the corridor, filling it from floor to ceiling. The Kethari screamed and fell back. The smell of burning chitin filled the air. Go, Brooke shouted. I will hold them. Brooke, no, Marcus started. I said go. She turned back to her work, flame dancing in her eyes. That is an order from a specialist to a sergeant, which I am pretty sure is not how it works, but I do not care. Marcus grabbed her shoulder. You have 2 minutes. Then you run. Understand? Brooke grinned. 2 minutes. Got it. The civilians poured through the narrow corridor. The Marines guided them, kept them calm, kept them moving. Behind them, they could hear Brooke's flamethrower roaring and the screams of Kethari dying. 2 minutes passed, then 3. Marcus was about to go back for her when he saw a figure emerge from the smoke. Brooke was running, her flamethrower empty, her armor blackened. Behind her, the flames were dying, and shapes were moving through them. Time to go, she shouted. They ran. The landing bay was just ahead. Marcus could see the dropships waiting, their engines running, their ramps down. Marine pilots stood at the controls, ready to launch the moment the last survivor was aboard. But the Kethari were not going to let them leave easily. They came from everywhere at once. From the corridors, from the ventilation shafts, from holes they had torn in the walls. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all converging on the landing bay. The Marines formed a final line. They stood shoulder to shoulder, their weapons raised, their backs to the civilians. They were exhausted. They were wounded. Some of them could barely stand, but they did not run. "Get on the ships," Marcus shouted at the Velkari. "All of you. Now." The civilians scrambled up the ramps. Parents carried children. The young carried the old. They packed into the dropships like sardines, filling every inch of space. Tyler Reeves went down with a wound to his leg. A Kethari had gotten close enough to slash him. Derek Nunez pulled him back and took his place in the line. "I can still fight," Tyler said through gritted teeth. "You can fight from the ship," Derek replied. He picked Tyler up and threw him toward the nearest dropship. "Go!" The last civilian boarded. The ramps began to close. "Marines, fall back," Marcus ordered. They moved in sequence, covering each other, firing as they retreated. One by one, they dove through the closing ramps. Megan, Derek, Brooke, the others. Marcus was the last one out. He stood at the ramp as it lifted, emptying his magazine into the horde of Kethari that reached for him with their claws. The ramp closed. The dropship lifted. And then they were flying. Out of the station. Into the void. Toward the Valor's edge. Behind them, the Sanctuary of Light continued to burn. But its people were safe. 300 lives. That was what they had come for. And that was what they had saved. Marcus sat down on the floor of the dropship. Around him, Marines and Velkari were packed together, bleeding and exhausted and alive. A Velkari child climbed into his lap and fell asleep against his armor. He did not move her. He just sat there, in the dark, in the quiet, and let himself breathe. They had done it. The screaming had stopped, and the Marines had walked through the smoke. 3 weeks had passed since the rescue. The Valor's Edge had limped home with its engines nearly dead and its hull covered in scars. 2 Marines had not come back. Their names were added to a long list of heroes who had given everything for people they had never met. The Velkari survivors had been taken to a safe world. Doctors had treated their wounds. Counselors had helped them begin to heal. They would carry the scars of that day forever, but they were alive, they were free, and they would never forget who had saved them. Now, Counselor Thyra stood before the Galactic Council. The chamber was enormous. It was shaped like a bowl, with hundreds of seats rising in tiers around a central platform. Representatives from every species in the known galaxy sat in those seats. The Dravin with their silver scales, the Morthax with their multiple eyes, the Solani with their translucent skin, dozens of others, all watching, all waiting. Thyra stood on the platform alone. Her skin glowed with a steady blue light. Not fear this time. Something else. Determination. "You have asked me to speak," she said. Her voice was carried to every corner of the chamber by invisible technology. "You have asked me why I believe humanity should be admitted to this council. I will tell you." She paused and looked around at the assembled delegates. Many of them would not meet her eyes. 3 weeks ago, my people were dying. A research station filled with scientists and families and children was being torn apart by Kethari raiders. We sent a distress signal. We begged for help. We pleaded for anyone to come and save us. She let the silence stretch. 17 species heard that signal. 17 species who call themselves civilized. 17 species who sit in this chamber and talk about justice and cooperation and the common good. Her voice grew harder. 17 species calculated the cost. They measured the distance. They counted the lives and decided that 300 souls were not worth the trouble. They decided that we were not worth saving. The chamber was silent. Some delegates shifted in their seats. Others looked away. But there was one more species, Thyra continued. One species that heard our cries and did not do calculations. One species that did not measure our lives against their convenience. She stood straighter. The humans came. Their ship was damaged in the battle to reach us. Their soldiers were wounded. They fought through fire and smoke and an army of monsters that have never been defeated by any species in this galaxy. They bled for us. They died for us. They carried our children in their arms, and our elders on their backs. And when I asked their leader why they had risked so much for strangers they had never met, do you know what he said? She looked around the chamber, meeting as many eyes as she could. He said, "Because you needed help." The words hung in the air. "Because you needed help," Thyra repeated. That is all. No calculations. No costs. No benefits. Just 4 simple words that mean more than any treaty or alliance or trade agreement ever could. She walked to the edge of the platform. You fear humans because they are warriors. You should. I watched them fight. I watched them walk into impossible odds without hesitation. I watched them face creatures that would make any of you flee in terror. They are capable of violence that we cannot imagine. But you are afraid of the wrong thing. Humans are not dangerous because of what they can destroy. They are remarkable because of what they will protect. They do not fight because they enjoy war. They fight because they cannot stand by while innocent people suffer. They fight because there is something inside them that breaks when they see others in pain. She turned back to face the council fully. I used to believe that the galaxy was cold. That every species looked out for itself and no one else. That kindness was just another word for weakness. The humans taught me something different. They taught me that strength is not about what you can take. It is about what you are willing to give. They gave their blood and their lives for people they had never met. They gave us hope when we had none. They gave us a future that we had accepted was gone. Thyra raised her hand, casting her vote. I say humanity belongs among us. Not because they are powerful. Not because they are useful. But because they remind us what we should be. What we have forgotten how to be. What we gave up long ago when we decided that compassion was not efficient. They came for us when no one else would. That is all I need to know. The vote was called. One by one, the species of the Galactic Council made their choice. It was not unanimous. Some species were too proud. Some were too afraid. Some had made calculations of their own and decided that humans were too unpredictable, too dangerous, too human. But enough voted yes. Humanity was admitted to the Galactic Council, and the galaxy would never be the same. 1 month later, Gunnery Sergeant Marcus Cole sat in his quarters at the Marine base on Earth. It was a small room with a bed, a desk, and a shelf where he kept the few things that mattered to him. Photos of his squad, letters from his mother, the dog tags of friends who had not come home. There was a knock at his door. "Come in," he said. A young private entered, carrying a small package. "This came for you, Sarge." Diplomatic pouch from somewhere called Velkar. Marcus took the package. It was light and wrapped in strange material that felt like silk. He opened it carefully. Inside was a crystal. It was small enough to fit in his palm, and it glowed with a soft blue light. The glow pulsed gently, like a heartbeat. There was a note with it, written in English. "Sergeant Cole, this is a memory stone. It is the most sacred gift my people can give. We place our most precious memories inside it, so they will live forever. This stone holds my memory of the day you came for us, the day you walked through fire and smoke to save people you did not know, the day you gave my daughter a future. I will tell her stories about your kind until the stars grow cold. I will tell her that when the universe turned its back on us, the humans reached out their hands. I will tell her that heroes are real, and they wear strange armor and speak in gentle voices. Thank you, warrior of Earth. Thank you for everything." With eternal gratitude, Counselor Thyra, Marcus held the crystal for a long time. The blue light played across his face. He thought about the mission. He thought about the Marines he had lost. He thought about the little girl who had fallen asleep against his armor on the dropship. He placed the crystal on his shelf, next to his other treasures. Then he stood up, put on his boots, and walked out the door. There was training today, new recruits to shape, skills to sharpen, preparations to make, because somewhere in the galaxy, someone else might need help, and when they screamed, the Marines would answer. They always did. They always would. That was what it meant to be human. That was what they were.